Bien,
Ça marche?
ça marche. On peut commencer. Nous allons commencer. Merci beaucoup à toutes et à tous d'être parmi nous.
Good morning. Thank you for being here. My name is Yann Algan. Sorry, apologies, Jan. I think your mic is not working. Take this one. So good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for being here for this prestigious session. We'll talk about populism. My name is Yann Algan. I teach economics. And to start with, I would like to set the scene as an introduction to this session, and then I'll give the mic to this prestigious guest. This session is called As Populism Won the Cultural Battle, and I'll start by being a little provocative. Populism is being successful in the US and in Europe, but they haven't won the battle of ideas. They have been successful because they have taken over our emotions. And they are fighting on a field that progressists don't want to use, which is anger. And here are two figures from the works we're carrying out, because we analyze everything that is being said on Twitter, and we combine it with surveys carried out among the population. Americans, Europeans, Germans, and English people talk about safety, school, and inequalities. But 50% of what they say is fueled by anger. And when we take a look at politics, at the French National Assembly or at the Congress, then we see that 50%, especially in the radical left, talk with anger. And what does this anger have to say? We need to understand this anger, and that's what we want to do here. Progressists don't want to use anger because anger is guilt-tripping. It means there's someone that is guilty, which is the wealthy or migrants. How can we go beyond this dynamic to get some hope with ambitious and tangible evidence? So that's what we're going to talk about today with experts. There will be representatives of public policy of the states, academics, journalists, as well as a representative of the EU Commission. Thank you very much. Jan is an economist. He is an expert in the topic, in today's topic. And he gave us inspiration to launch the debate. And over to our guest, Yael Braun-Pivet is the president of the French National Assembly. She's a member of Renaissance in the Yvelines department. Welcome, Jacques Attali, an economist. He is also a CEO, and he was the one who discovered Emmanuel Macron, if I may say. Welcome to Melissa Bell, which is a journalist from the UK. She specializes in international relations. She works for the CNN-based CNN in Paris. Welcome to Paolo Gentiloni, former commissioner for economic monetary affairs. He was also a minister. He's an MP from the Democratic Party. He has extensive experience in Italy, and he'll give us an Italian point of view on the rise of populism. And finally, welcome to Herbert Kichelt. I hope I did pronounce your name well. You are a professor. You teach international relations. You have authored many books about democratic system, and you will provide us with an American point of view on the rise of populism in the US. But to start with, over to Yael Braun-Pivet, which is the president of the French National Assembly. Is this battle about culture or emotions? Do you think that non-populist parties, which we represent, also have a responsibility in the rise and the acceleration of populism, since they turn away from the people's anger? Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for giving me the floor. I am delighted to be part of this debate. Progressist Party and governmental party have a responsibility in the rise of anger. We are not the only one who have responsibility, but we do have some, and it is important for us to confess. And when I go on the field and when I talk to citizens, I see that if we deny anger and if we deny our responsibility in the rise of this anger, then nobody will listen to us. Indeed, that's how we lose credibility. We must accept our responsibility. And we must agree on a starting point. We must recognize that anger is legitimate. We cannot just turn away from anger and ignore it, saying, we're okay, look at everything we've done. You're wrong to be angry. That's not right. Some of our co-citizens are angry. We must understand it and accept it without turning away from it. We cannot deny our responsibility in the emergence of this anger. And those are two crucial points we must put forward. And as a politician, I do think it is crucial and important. But then, what does anger feed on? It feeds on fear, and today's world scares young people and our co-citizens. There's a lot of anxiety in addressing politics and economy. There's anxiety. We question what our country has become, what the republic has become. And these are points that were put forward by the populists, that were instrumentalized by the populists. And finally, they can't see the results of our policy. Take health, for example. Health has become a priority for French people. A few years ago, it was unemployment, but nowadays, access to healthcare is the #1 concern of French people. And we have achieved many things by widening access to medicine, school, while accepting the so-called junior physicians to come to France and work. However, French people still struggle to get to see a doctor or a specialized doctor. They're angry, they're disappointed, and other people, populists, will come and make promises, because that's what they do. They say we're not credible because we do not have fast enough results. So that's what the populists will instrumentalize and co-opt. They will make promises. They'll promise immediate results. So they will use and instrumentalize the anger. As a member of a moderate party, it is really difficult for me to listen to the anger, to understand it, and to provide a response. But I don't want to provide a populist response. I want a better response. It will be more complex, more difficult to implement. It will take longer to implement it. And last thing, we need to talk to people's brain. Populists use and instrumentalize emotions. We would like to do the same, but we won't. We need to use your brain to talk to you as an individual. We need to talk to you. We need to take part in this type of forum. We need to take you on a journey with us. We need you to participate, to take part in the decisions. So in order to fight populism, we need to enhance democracy. everyone must take part in democracy. Citizens, the French National Assembly, the Senate, and so on. And once we get this enhanced democracy, then we'll help collective intelligence emerge, and then populism will go back. Thank you very much. So we have the first round we'll have a first round, and Jacques Attali mentioned to Populist. Forget what I wrote down because I changed my mind. But there's a question I want to ask you. You said that some populists just destroy each other, so it is not the end. The real issue is another one. Populism is winning because of those who are supposed to be leading the country. And it is not an illogical or preposterous populism. There's anger against the lack of action of politicians in the EU, the US, and other countries, among which Italy. And when there's populism, then there are people going away, because when politicians don't act, you want to get rid of them. That's what happened in 1789 with the first soft revolution. Then there was a second, harder revolution, and here we are today. Why is Trump back? Well, he went back at the first time he got to the presidency. It's because Obama didn't do anything. He was re-elected because Joe Biden didn't do anything. Why is the AfD almost reaching power? Because the government doesn't do anything. Why will left-wing and right-wing populists win the next elections in France? Why? Well, because politicians haven't done anything since the 80s. And who is talking about France by 2050? Who mentioned the values we need to defend? There are no projects. Who mentions long-term measures? Who mentioned any long-term program? And if there's a program, it is not applied. However, if you're serious about being a politician, then you know that if you don't implement your program in the 3 months following your election, nothing will happen. Because beyond 3 months, the elected politician isn't popular anymore. But if you want to act in the first 3 months, you must have promoted your program well. You must be bold enough to implement your program. And those are qualities that are lacking in the political landscape. Obviously, there have been achievements, but there have been failures. Failure to address the great issues of France, wealth inequalities, no gender equality, the destruction of public powers, and I do not see any politicians promoting vision for 2050. I do not see any credible enough program that will be implemented. Nobody can guarantee what they will do in the first 3 months after their elections.
Yeah, it's quite clear and quite radical. There's a position, Melissa Bell. Let's take an Anglo-Saxon point of view to react on what Jacques Attali just said. You share the idea that Trump took power because Obama and Biden separately did nothing. I think there are many reasons explaining Trump taking power in Trump 1, Trump 2. The populism feeds itself, they feed themselves. We start with the idea of George Orwell on who controls language, controls the minds. And what you say is very true about anger and the fear that make people very flexible. And the voters, are attracted by these codes, by this language, the idea for the people against the elite. And they borrow, they against strength, and all the populist movements feed on themselves. They support each other. Like, for example, the populists in Europe. The idea was getting together. What MAGA contributes with here is a new vocabulary. It's they make them legitimate. I'll give you a simple example. that we, in the mouth of President Trump, the lawfare, and it corresponds to what we've been saying in France, not only by the extremists, it's questioning the independence of the judiciary system that we see also in moderate parties. It's growing. It's not the fault of the Americans, but what MAGA contributed with is a language, a framing that adds validation to these positions that used to be that of the extremes. The extreme movements and with some other parties or personalities in the different parties. But what I mean to say here is the strength of these populist forces, which are very different. It's a language, use fear, is to support each other and make their movements legitimate, with a new legitimacy, adding strength to the far right, European far right. In Europe, we find sovereignist parties, but with this language, these new codes, and these common battles, they manage to get together, to be unified and strengthen their position. And the first part of the other one is the language of the elite. If we take the Hungarian case example, because I find it fascinating with a view to the progress made by populism, and now we're going back to populism, the other paradox, of course, is that the language of the populists, nobody is more a member of the elites than a populist that reaches power. If we take Hungary and the American case is a good example, and there's an inherent paradox that conveys strength to them, and they show us what we could expect. The extremists that feed out of each other. Paolo Gentiloni, with your long Italian experience, Monsieur Gentiloni, do you share the idea that the lack of action by politicians coming from democratic parties that are more on the democratic wing, did that lead to populism, as it was the case in Italy with Giorgia Meloni? First of all, thank you for this invitation. I'm an expert of populism now. I became an expert as Italian, I suppose. Okay. We have a certain experience because, in fact, we had 32 years ago a leading entrepreneur who won the elections with a small, side inclination that we could call populism. It was very different to today's populism, but there was already something. It was the richest man in Italy, but he was against the elite. He was against the existing power, and he tried to mobilize in that sense. And we also had a government that held together the right-wing and left-wing populism, and that was 8 years ago, and it lasted a year. Okay, there was this movement, and today we have, as you know, far-right government. What learning can we draw from this for Europe and for France of this experience? Well, the party, Mrs. Meloni's party, has become the first leading party of Italy instantaneously, very rapidly. Why? Maybe because it was the only party that did not take part in a sacred union of all the parties supporting the Draghi government. The only opposing party was the party that went from 4 to 5% to 30% very rapidly. So what happened after that? Well, quote Jacques Attali, they did nothing. In this case, it's true. I don't necessarily share the same, will not quote President Obama on that matter, but for sure the Italian government, we can't define the Italian government as a populist government today. Its positions on the economy are very prudent. They have the cold feet, so on migrations, a bit of propaganda, but nothing really new and innovating. And as you know, the relationship between this government and Trump is completely broken. And it was one of the key elements giving strength to this government at the beginning, this relationship with Trump. What I want to say is, yes, populism is becoming stronger, but it's nothing new. I'm sorry to say that I know that in France you are in a situation where for the first time there could be a rise of the far right or extreme left. I don't think they will make it to the presidency. It's new for France. Not completely new if you look at other places. We have Trump in the U.S. I have a lot of relationship with Trump 1, but it was an apprenticeship and he was learning. It's now Trump of the second administration. But let's say the true question we have to ask ourselves is, yes, populism is growing, but is it really winning? I think I wouldn't say that. They're not capable of bringing forth the answers people who have supported them, the forgotten people who voted for Trump, are expecting. Those answers are not there. The cultural war is still there, and they do give them a chance today, but the answers are not there. And if you look at the transatlantic relationships, I remember very well Clinton. I was younger then, with Reagan. There were times where the changes in the U.S. policies, triggered major changes in Europe. But apparently, it is no longer the case at all. Nobody, also in the far right, want to have. I'll conclude with a small example, if I may. There's an innovation in Italy, okay? There's novelty in Italy. And there's a new, very small party that was created by a general in Italy, and that gave a legacy in a far right party, right-wing party, against Meloni, the Liga, and the right-wing government. It started very small, and now he's at 7%, this party. But this general is not with Trump. They have good relationships with Putin. Unfortunately, it's a party that wants to continue using Russian gas. It's a party where the usual things are fatherland and family. Ah bon.
Ça ne marche pas.
Doesn't work. I'm sorry, he shifted to English. Doesn't work, but I think we have to be afraid. We have to fear autocracies much more than populism. I think the real threat in Europe, it's autocracies more than populism. If we win, of course, if we win the elections in France, thank you, Mr. Minister. Mr. Commissioner, so the populists there's an overspill on their extremes, for example. This is really scary. Mr. Kitschelt, Herbert Kitschelt, the American experience leads to the point that we have a Trump 2. And would you say that in the U.S. populism won the cultural battle? Because this is the topic of our own table, right?
Let me get to the United States after I make 3 general points to put the United States in context. First point, what is populism? Populism is a rhetoric that can be filled with different content. It is characterized by dividing the population into a small elite and a large homogeneous mass, which is not true by socio-demographic standards. It thinks the elite is in conspiration against the mass. It believes that majoritarian principles And referenda, plebiscites can change this and dislocate this elite. Fourth and fifth, and these are 2 points that were already mentioned here, populists look for quick solutions. They look for short causal chains, and they discount the future. They're impatient. Now you can fill this populist rhetoric with different content, and that's, I think, also why it's so difficult to talk about a victory, because we have a right-wing populism which focuses on questions of civil liberties, xenophobia. Patriarchy is certainly an issue that's coming back in the United States, and globalization. We have a left-wing populism that focuses on the billionaires, on cost of living, and they have very different demands. So left and right-wing populism, it's now playing out in the United States, it's also playing out in many European countries, are at loggerheads with one another. So before we talk about the victory of populism, we have a left and a right-wing populism. Point number 2, a lot of the comments I've heard here so far focus on the psychological element, anger, identities. But underlying, there are material concerns. There is uncertainty, and we face new challenges that the conventional parties of the last 50 years did not face in this way. They were, in fact, very successful. If you look at the rise of the welfare state, you mentioned a number of these achievements. But think of the new challenges that no one really has an answer to, but all of which are complex, involve long-term developments, typically are front-loaded in terms of cost and the benefits coming later. The first one, that's the challenges of artificial intelligence for labor markets. The second one, rapidly falling fertility all across the Western Hemisphere, and it's not enough anymore to have early help for preschool children. It's the problem and challenge of raising children and giving them the cultural capital throughout a period of 20 or 25 years, and that creates a great deal of anxiety. The third I need not talk about because there are many panels here that cover it, is the climate mitigation. And the fourth, Western democracies now face an international of autocrats. This is what you mentioned. It's funny, all these right-wing populists say they are nationalists, but they create a new international and intervene in other elections, the United States government being at the forefront. So we have these 5 challenges. These are new challenges. If you go back to the 1890s and 1900s, social democrats, Christian democrats at the time also did not have answers. And it took the crisis of the Great Depression through trial and error to find answers. So it's, I think, also asking too much to have the answers now. But the answers are unlike anything the populists can address. They are complex and long-term. Third point, how can populism be contained? I'm not saying it can be rubbed out. Populism is a cry of grievance, a cry of despair. With a French sociologist, it's a reaction to anomie, Emile Durkheim. And this will run its course as long as politicians have to try and develop responses to it. But a catalyst might be whenever populists come into power, all across the world, not just in Europe, in Latin America, in Asia, when populists come to power, they create economic and social disaster. We most recently saw this in Hungary, which is a small country and I think on the periphery of our vision. But coming from the United States, there are many indications that the Trump administration, in terms of economic policies, social policies, creates a disaster, which at the moment is still staved off through the tremendous boom in artificial intelligence. But in a bittersweet way, the demonstrable failure of right-wing populism in the United States could be a damper for populism in Europe. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. La parole à la défense. Madame Yael Braun-Pivet, je vous redonne la parole parce que... Puisque vous répondez à Jacques Attali.
Yael Braun-Pivet, what's your answer to Jacques Attali, who mentioned a populist crisis at the left and at the right because the governments that have been in power are not active enough. I do agree with some of the things that have been said. There have been issues that were to be solved. These issues are really complex, and populists do bring quick fixes to these issues. And let me comment on that. As I said before, sometimes results don't come fast enough, but it doesn't mean that we haven't achieved anything. But indeed, some changes have been made, but are not visible yet. And this is part of the everyday life. Sometimes you just can't get a physician. So we can keep on showing our achievement these past years, but people only want one thing. They want to get on their phone and get an appointment at the doctor. We are faced with a crisis. We want more efficiency, more results from our policies, but the process is really long. And I am the president of the French National Assembly, and as such, a few months ago, I organized a session which was called law application. As you know, we adopt laws, but these laws must be implemented. They must yield results and have an impact on your life. So we need executive orders, we need measures. And this past years, the rate of application, the rate of law application have collapsed. That's why I organized a public session, because I wanted the National Assembly to review all the laws that have been adopted and to review what has been done for these laws to come into force. We reviewed all the laws, and it had a great impact, to be honest. And I gave the news there would be this public session to implement the law. And from that moment on, I've never seen that many measures and laws and decree being implemented. If there are no measures, law doesn't come into force. And citizens just think we're not doing anything. They tell us you do work on laws, but there are no results. So that's why we're faced with this crisis. That's one of the reasons. We need the Parliament to do its job, to approve a law, to implement it, to control the action. We need an executive power that will control and monitor laws' implementation. So there have been there have been delays for breast cancer, for example, which means that millions of patients wait for measures to be implemented. They've been waiting for 18 months for the law to be implemented. It was supposed to be implemented within 6 months, and this will fuel the anger, the lack of results. And that's another fight to carry out for every state, for every power, for every healthcare administration. We serve citizens, and that must be our core duty. We just cannot keep waiting for others to act, because that's what will fuel populism. Jacques Attali, over to you. Obviously, I do agree 100% with Yael. There is insufficient action. So what is being prepared in France at the moment? So we are close, so I can actually make a few jokes. So what is happening right now in France? We don't want a pro-Russian, anti-Jewish, anti-Europe coalition. And this coalition has a definition of French people. For some people, people have different definitions of what the French people should be. French people can be all citizens plus foreigners or not. And what happens in the US? Take a democratic and anti-AI and progress president will take over from Trump. In the UK, in Germany, the AfD will take power. Consequently, we'll see a coalition of countries that we have one point in common: they all be pro-Russian. And as Europeans, we are the only democratic region of the world. We are the prey of the world instead of being an example. And if we don't act, we will be sidelined. So that's what I see, that's what's in store, and that's what will happen. Because I do not think that in the next 8 and 9 months we'll be bold enough to act. You said that we did what we had to do and we were only missing a decree, an executive order for the law to come into force. But when did we do the right thing? And I'm not referring to the current president, who's not better than his predecessors, who has taken measures to industrialize the country, to develop women's careers, to develop the engineer profession, to prepare for climate change, to restore biodiversity, to fight against the so-called death industries, which means industries that destroy. We haven't done those things for 40 years, and we're trying to find the guilty one, and we're pointing our finger at Europe. And this is a good basis for populism. And if you raise the question here in this session or before the French people, do you think that laws can be superior, greater than treaties? People will say yes, but the answer is no. International law is greater than national law, or we have to get out of the treaties we're supposed to implement. And if we apply this only rule, don't talk about the things you cannot change, everything will be different. However, politicians talk without reaching a consensus. So we'll fight populism and pessimism if we talk about programs and if eventually we can have a discussion about people. This will not happen, and populists will soon be in power everywhere in Europe. That is quite a pessimistic vision. But 50% of people share your view nowadays. My think tank will work on a transparent political program for non-populist parties, and we're doing everything we can to be wrong. Melissa, do you think that France is doomed to have this populist power? I agree, because France, as well as all EU member states, are praised for Russia as well for Washington on ideological and geostrategical grounds. But it doesn't mean that all is lost. Because there's something else which is quite ironic. There is a reactionary side, and we see what happened in Budapest in real time. We saw what happened in the US with this pre-announced catastrophe. So democratic orders are being disturbed in Europe. But let's go back to the Hungary. When MAGA prepared to go back to power, they went back to Budapest to understand how you can gain power and transform democracy in something different. this liberal democracy put forward by Orban. So MAGA went to see Orban's playbook, and Orban said, just get rid of independent media. That's what we're seeing. That's coming here too. And once you got power, you stay there and you create this peculiar regime we saw in Hungary and which is arising in the US. And the independence of the media is being destroyed slowly, gradually, to transform democracy. MAGA is building itself and gives a new dimension to its ideas and frames. And there's something that was really interesting with Hungary. Nobody could imagine that Peter Magyar could retake power from Orban, which had a captive state, and he achieved this because even in non-democracies there are still elections, and as soon as there are elections, not all is lost. Mr. Gentiloni, you said that the populists in power in Italy don't do anything. Is it still there? Are they well in the survey? Are they popular? Could they hope to win the elections? Did they find the quick solution to stay in power? I was about to comment and reuse what Jacques Attali said. Our issues are complex. They will not be solved by populist quick fixes. Trump will reindustrialize the US. No, he won't. Biden might have done something more about it to reindustrialize the US. And Joe Biden did implement measures that were more interesting for European companies. And it was certainly more interesting than the tariff policy implemented by the Trump administration. So there are complex issues at hand. But I do not think that populism will win elections in the whole world. I cannot see happening. But we make mistakes, and the greatest victory of populists in Europe happened in 10 years. And it was the result of a mistake and of the silliness of a party that chose to solve its own issues, the party of David Cameron. And this party chose to resolve their issues with one referendum. And here's the result. Here's the message they had. Take back control. And ask any British citizen, have they taken back control of their countries? Well, 62% of British nationals say no. And we've come to the regret felt by all those who regret leaving the EU. And I'm concerned because if we can't address the issues of our future with ecological transition, the future of industry and of the European welfare, if we can't take up these challenges, then I'm not afraid of a potential rise of populism. Populists will not win elections in France if French people don't make any silly mistakes. Nevertheless, I am still scared because democracy will weaken if there are no responses. Then some countries might well be able to take action quickly, and left and right-wing populist parties could converge together along with Putin. And this is what we should be scared of. There's a risk of convergence against democracy and against Europe and for autocracies. And as the Yael Brown-Pivet said, we must also have better democracies, democracies that are closer to citizens. And it is the most difficult thing to achieve in the world. But we should be far more scared of autocracy than of the rise of populists in Europe. They will not win elections, but they won't if we avoid any silly mistakes. Thank you.
So we'll see. We'll see what's happening in some countries. We'll see if they continue their rise and extension. Mr. Kitchener, how, Mr. Kitchell, can the reasonable camp gain ground, win ground, faced with the populism that is on the rise in Europe and in North America?
I wish I had an answer to this question, but let me reframe it and think about the diverse anxiety that we have about the rise of populism. It's quite a different matter in the United States. It's different in France. It's different in Northern Europe. Why is that? There are essentially two mechanisms that come into play. On the one hand, there's a demand-side difference. If you want to understand the strength of American right-wing populism, you have to immerse yourself in studying religion. It's evangelical Christianity in a way that is unknown across Western Europe, that has been a motor of the right-wing mobilization. And that is something that many Europeans are not familiar with, something that goes back hundreds of years. And it covers 20 to 25% of the US population, of whom 80% vote for Donald Trump. And the evangelical churches are what one might call the equivalent of what labor unions used to be to social democratic parties in Western Europe. Lenin might have called it the transmission belt of the movement into politics. That's one thing. A second thing, the United States had a right-wing populist president 180 years ago. His name was Andrew Jackson. He also came in with a strong drive of anti-statism and populist mobilization. When he came into the White House in 1829, there was a riotous party of 30,000 people who got drunk. And he destroyed the American financial system at the time. And economists ever since have studied how much this set back the United States in the 19th century because this system was destroyed. So that's on the demand side. On the supply side, there is another very important thing, and that's where France comes in. The United States has a first-past-the-post electoral system for the legislature, combined with a presidential system, a one-round plurality-win presidential system, with manipulations and misrepresentation on top of this. In Europe, France is the only country that even approximates a system where we have a presidentialism combined with a majoritarian electoral system, although it's not quite the same thing. Britain, of course, has a parliamentary system. But if you look at any of the other countries, including Italy, we have PR systems or mixed systems that make it much harder for populists to take over and take over unilaterally. Look at the Netherlands, where Wim Wenders won 25% of the vote and is not capable of forming a government. And I'm much more optimistic than you are that there will not be a left and right-wing merger of populists. And certainly in PR systems, you can gain a much more of a break on this. You can create a break on this than elsewhere.
On va solliciter la salle pour une ou deux questions. Peut-être que...
Questions from the floor now, maybe. We have a walking microphone to take the questions. I will be the walking microphone, so there we go. So I think that the challenge for the next election is simply the survival of the human race. The survival of the human race in two senses. The survival of the human species, we have the climate issues, and the survival of the human share of our humanity. So I'm talking about the social urgency. So what is your question? And that's where I go along with Monsieur Attali, but making a difference. I don't mix up the populism and the far right. They send us back to the French of the past and a radical left that has written itself from the leaders, and it's getting closer to the defense of life than what Monsieur Attali is saying. What will Monsieur Attali answer to this? Unfortunately, I don't think that a French election will be enough to solve the problems of the human race, even though we thought that we were the lighthouses of the world, and we need to remain that. But yes, there are very interesting things in the LFI program if we rid it of its fantasies of anti-Semitic, anti-European, pro-Russian positions. But it means that we get rid of the philosophy of the program, which is to be subject to foreign powers. There's a lot to say about the economy of the sea, industrialization, everything. A lot to say. Second question from the floor, sir. No, this lady here, Madame. This lady, yes. Thank you for your presentations. I think a simple question: how can we tie democracy to the people? How can we attach, democracy to the people? So long question, but complicated question. Yael Brown-Pivet. It's the stake of this challenge of this debate. We're talking about our democracy. I want more democracy. So it's more participation, more citizen involvement. So it means referendums, not only, but consulting, associating, bringing together the population, making the public debate, whether at the local level, fostering public debate. That's one thing. And the next thing is we should base things on knowledge. In fact, we have citizens who unfortunately do not know their democracy. They don't have the right knowledge of their institutions. So it's related to fantasies, but we are very transparent, nevertheless. And I think there's an educational aspect here for the younger and the elder on their knowledge of the democratic system, the understanding of the democratic system. I think starting from there, I think we will renovate the attachment to the democratic system. Unfortunately, often with everything that was said on the efficiency, the lack of results, often there are people who figure, well, in the end, less democracy would bring more results because we would get rid of the counterpowers, we would get rid of all these administrative red tape which stops us and hinders us. That's a fundamental, essential mistake. We need frames, we need a scope, we need procedures. I know it's not really popular, but procedures protect you. It guarantees to have guarantees and guarantees equality, but it's based on the knowledge of the system, which is not an obstacle. It doesn't stop you from moving. It's, on the contrary, highly protective of who you are, what you are. And I will conclude with this. If you have one thing to remember of this debate, or what I told you today, well, I'd like you to, as a takeaway, we are strongly attacked on the state of law. The rule of law, on the Constitution, the rule of law, I'm sorry, that would stop us from moving. But always remember that the Constitution is there to protect you. It protects you from the exercise of power, but it protects your rights and your freedom. The Constitution gives you the right to come and go. You can protest. You can practice your own religion. When you go against the Constitution for other reasons today, tomorrow we will attack the Constitution to attempt to your essential freedoms, fundamental. Sometimes the Constitution may stop some politicians to act, but always remember that the Constitution is there to protect you, protect what you are today, and to talk frankly, respect it. Thank you. Last question And we will conclude. If there's a question, yes, sir. This gentleman here for a short question. So thank you for your this debate. Monsieur Attali, talking about the risk of the coming in of the far right presidency. Do you think that saying this publicly is, saying that everything, the game is played, that we will end up with the extreme parties? If we say, well, this is a fact, they're going to win, no. What I'm trying to do is to wake up everybody. It's a wake-up call. Not only the people in the room, and it happens a lot of times when the far right arrives and gains power. It's always by surprise. The people wake up in the morning and they have the extreme right at power, and this is what's happening. We're slowly, but surely sliding. For 40% of the people, we are preparing. No. And it happens, and I will do everything so it doesn't happen. But as it is going, I think it will happen. So I want to. It's a wake-up call. So juste pour
ajouter une chose.
So to add one thing, don't think, we always say what we think, but don't think that the trajectory we had with Mrs. Meloni in Italy will repeat itself automatically if there's the victory of the far right in France. Italy and France are very different countries. The idea that the Italians and the French, that the idea they have of themselves is very different. And the impact of a victory of the far right in France would be completely different to what happened to that of Italy. Also for the aspect of the organization of the power of the government, of the parliament and everything that the professor highlighted earlier. So that's why I say that it's very important for all of Europe, for us Europeans, that something important takes place here between the mainstream parties, the central government, socialists, Republicans, call them what you want. Thank you, Mr. Minister. One word of conclusion, Mr. Yann Algan, and we will close the session. So I'd like to thank all the panel members, and to sum up, we've heard a lot of things. Firstly, when the populists gain power, it's often by surprise, but it's often it's not the panacea, far from being the panacea, and it's difficult to get rid of them afterwards. But to avoid this onset or this the right winning, we have to have a long-term vision, but also actions, very concrete things. And you've given us some paths to follow. Thank you very much. Thank you all. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Great.